Good evening, everyone, and we are back with another episode, and I'm going to get right into it. But have you got your project? Are you all settled in? Do you have a drink and a snack? I have some ice water here for me, and I want you to be comfortable and relax while you're doing your stitching or whatever craft you're doing while you're listening to this audiobook. I really enjoying this myself, and I'm enjoying sharing my story with you, and I appreciate the comments that I've had so far. So thank you so much for being with me, and let's continue now with Victoria and Rashid's story. Sweltering humidity thickened the air as Rashid and Khalifar walked from the private airport's security hub to the waiting limousine. Rashid stretched his neck. He disliked the strangling attire Western men wore with ease. The fit of each garment prevented the smallest circulation of air, which could give a man relief from the muggy heat. The cool air spilling from the open door of the waiting limousine gave him some hope as he slid into the car. "Is Mr. Ballard expecting us?" he asked. "Yes, Your Highness. My instructions are to take you straight to the Ballard building unless you have another stop you wish to make." "No stops," said Rashid. Narrowing his mental and visual focus, he stared straight ahead. He was not experiencing the joyful contemplation of a man in anticipation of his nuptials. What he was feeling could better be worked out in a battle exercise with his bodyguards. Depending on someone else to arrange the details of his marriage bordered on the objectionable at best. The sooner this arrangement saw completion, the sooner the perverse annoyance would end. Allah was not favoring him with speed, however. What could not have been more than 15 miles from airport to Jacob's office took the better part of an hour in the congested New York traffic. At least he and Khalifar entered the Ballard building and, by private elevator, made their way to the executive suite. The receptionist informed them of a delay in Mr. Ballard's arrival and offered them a seat and a cup of coffee while they waited. Rashid refused both. Instead, he walked to an expansive wall of glass and stared at New York's towering structures of concrete and steel. He wondered how He wondered how anyone survived a lifetime in this hard landscape. Canyons of stone and mortar were poor substitutes for unending skies and armies of majestic dunes marching to a shared destiny. A commotion across the room seized his attention from the city below. A whirlwind hit the outer door of the reception area in the form of a woman. Backing through the door, she shouted at someone to hold the elevator. Depositing 2 large bags on the floor, she hurried back through the entrance. With his attention riveted, Rashid waited. He was not disappointed. The woman's return resembled a theatrical production. Loaded with more packages, she swept into the room and tossed them one at a time toward the receptionist. She sucked up the room's energy with her vibrancy. Rashid could not help but stare. By the incredulous look on Khalifar's face, he was suffering the same problem. The woman personified exquisiteness. A red leather skirt ended at mid-thigh, exposing long, silky legs. Her full breast heaved under a low-cut white blouse. A profusion of curly, shoulder-length, red hair framed eyes as green as a vertile valley. Her blazing red lips parted in a beguiling smile. Shaking her hair from her face, she tilted her upper body over the corner of the receptionist's desk and added a small package to the growing stack. Swallowing, he wondered just how much provocation one scrap of white material could handle. When he heard the low rumble in Khalifar's throat, He knew he wasn't the only man wondering the same thing. When she spoke, her voice bubbled with an unsinkable spirit. Victoria needs these right away. Is she in yet? The mention of Victoria's name jerked Rashid's attention back to the woman's seductive mouth. No, Miss Heasley. However, she is due at any time. Gesturing toward the seating area, she added, would you like to have a seat and wait for her? The woman's eyes followed the direction of Miss Timble's hand. Rashid smiled as he and Khalifar underwent a very thorough inspection. He was fascinated by the mischievous grin on the woman's face as she approached Khalifar and extended her hand. Hello, my name is Jessica Heathley. Who might you gentlemen be? Khalifar stared at the woman's upturned face and extended hand. Are you addressing me? He asked, raising one brow in a condescending manner. Rashid caught the flame in his friend's eyes before he successfully smothered it. Jessica laughed. I believe I am, unless you have a split personality in there somewhere. If so, this is truly my lucky day. Amused, Rashid waited for Khalifar to respond. Seldom did he see his first regent at a loss for words. Waiting for Jacob was not turning out to be the annoyance he expected. At least, he could enjoy a little entertainment at Khalifar's expense. Come now, I know you have a name, prompted Jessica. My name is Khalifar Hussein Jafiel Qadian. Rashid chuckled under his breath. Khalifar's deep baritone voice grated with rigid formality, while his eyes made a complete assessment of the woman's feminine charms. The edgy heat of awareness in his eyes would have sent a woman of their culture scurrying for safety. Not this woman, though. Wow, what a mouthful. Much too formal for me. I'll just call you Kali. The name suits you. I don't have to tell you how utterly fabulous you are. Truly the best-looking man I've seen all day. Are you from New York? Khalifar lifted his head and his nostrils flared. Rashid did not know whether Khalifar was going to embrace the woman or strangle her. Either would be a disaster. Intervention seemed a necessity. Stepping forward to stand beside Khalifar, Rashid entered the conversation. We are from Ahalaman. Please excuse my friend's reticence. He means no disrespect. Khalifar shot him a withering glare. Don't worry. He's too cute for me to be mad at him. Giggling, she favored Rashid with her infectious smile. And how about you? What is your name? I am Rashid Devar. Did you say Rashid? Oh my goodness. So you're Rashid. I've been looking for you everywhere. I beg your pardon, do I know you? Rashid asked, both amused and confused. No, but we have a mutual friend. At least I think we do. You are a friend of Victoria's, aren't you? Jessica stared at him as if her life hung on his reply. Yes, I have met Miss Ballard. Has she spoken of our acquaintance? No, heavens no. Not on purpose anyway. Your name came up quite by accident. Jacob Ballard's appearance prevented Rashid from pursuing what was turning out to be an interesting and informative conversation. Please excuse my tardiness, said Jacob. I hope you haven't been waiting long. Let us go into my office. Jacob indicated the door to his right and then turned to Jessica. Hello, Jessica. Victoria said to tell you she would be delayed and would meet you at the ball tonight. I see you have met His Highness Prince Rashid Devar and his first regent, Khalifar Qadian. Yes, we've been having a lovely time getting acquainted, but these naughty boys didn't tell me anything about being royalty. She winked at Cauliflower, whose eyes threatened all manner of slow torture. Since you obviously have business to discuss, Mr. Ballard, I won't keep your guests chatting. I'll catch Victoria later. Rashid took the hand Miss Heathly offered and bid her goodbye. She turned toward Cauliflower and blew him an audacious kiss, then disappeared through the door, emptying the room of all her playful energy. Rashid was eager to follow Jacob into his office, but Cauliflower was unmoving, his eyes fixed on the door Miss Heathly just exited. Leaning in Cauliflower's direction, Rashid could not suppress the urge to goad his friend just a little. She was lovely, was she not? Asked Rashid. Cauliflower snorted. A brazen female, totally unsuitable. Unsuitable for what? Rashid asked with a grin. My lord, don't we have some business of yours to attend to? After all, you are the one who bought one of these American women. Perhaps I could include Miss Heathly in the deal for you. The horrified look on his first regent's face pleased Rashid. Laughing, he gestured for Cauliflower to follow him into Jacob's office. Two hours later, Rashid sat on the edge of the divan in Jacob's office and pondered the barren formality of his marriage ceremony. His agreement with Jacob was honored. Fulfilling his own desires would come later. For now it was enough that the woman was his by her own law. When he returned with his bride to Ahalaman, they would marry again to satisfy Bedouin tradition as well. Control invigorated his spirit. For the first time in weeks, uncertainty no longer nagged him. Relaxing, he sank deeper into the leather sofa he and Cauliflower shared. His new father-in-law, seated behind his desk on the far side of the room, looked exhausted and worried. The grayish pallor of his skin and the pain-inducing tightness around his lips made the outward sign of his illness more apparent than ever. Cancer was an unrelenting enemy and one he was sorry Jacob was facing. As soon as Victoria was informed of her marriage, Jacob could release responsibility to him. As a father, he would be satisfied in having taken care of his daughter's future in the best way possible. There was another emotion reflected in the long sighs. Jacob repeatedly exhaled. Apprehension. Now would probably be a good time to reassure his friend of his intention to honor his trust. Are you having second thoughts, Jacob? You don't look comfortable with your decision. Jacob turned to stare at him. You don't miss much, do you? I was hoping my qualms weren't obvious. I'm not looking forward to informing Victoria of the fact I've just married her to a complete stranger. I know arranged marriages are not customary here, but in my country they are quite ordinary, even expected. Be certain your daughter's adjustment to her new situation will be as easy as I can make it. In my care, she will be safe from any who would harm her. Given time, I am sure she will come to appreciate the wisdom of your decision. May I say without insult, Rashid, you do not know my daughter. Your daughter is intelligent. She will soon accept the decisions you have made in her behalf and in her interests. Take a few moments and settle your thoughts before we call her in. If she discerns you are in doubt, she will find trusting your judgment difficult, a situation which can only cause her distress. A moment more would be good. There's one more thing, though. I would appreciate you not telling Victoria about the circumstances concerning Jaden's threats. I don't want her dealing with fear along with everything else. Of course. Now please give yourself a minute to relax. Jacob nodded his head in acceptance of the short reprieve and turned his chair toward the wall of windows behind his desk. With time to think, Rashid's mind returned to the morning's events. Judge Hennington, a friend of Jacob's, officiated over the marriage. There were 5 people present: Judge Hennington, Jacob, Khalifar himself, and a woman named Judith, who stood as proxy for Victoria. The arrangement seemed more than bizarre, as he had taken his place next to the small, gray-haired woman in the plain black suit. Judge Hennington seemed reluctant at first. Having known Victoria since birth, he was at a loss to understand her strange decision. Reviewing her signature on the appropriate legal documents eventually settled his doubts, and he proceeded with Jacob's arrangements. The next part of the drama would presumably take place as soon as Jacob could regain his composure. Rashid glanced at Khalifar, seated at the side, and envied the man his patience. He shifted his gaze from Khalifar to the strange landscape visible through the large windows of Jacob's office. The diverse tops of many buildings jutted upward on a canvas of blue sky. He was a man of the land. Here in the tops of these structures, solidity was far below. The scene seemed to mock him, reminding him that a man of the earth mates with a woman of the clouds at his own peril. Rashid flexed his legs and crossed one over the other. Offering Jacob more time had been an act of kindness, but sitting still was worse than torture. He wanted to see Victoria, to see himself reflected in her luminous blue eyes, to see the dawn of understanding as she looked upon him the first time as her husband. Victoria sighed with relief to see the boxes marked with Madame Solidar's logo waiting in her office. She would open them after she made the final arrangements for tomorrow's departure. She was to attend the European Banking Conference. Her father sprang the assignment on her late the evening before, another evidence of his strange behavior of late. She had called to let the children know she would be gone for 2 or 3 weeks. She did not want them worrying. She needed to settle 2 more details, and she would be ready to leave the office. As hostess, she was expected to arrive early at the children's charity ball. There was no time to waste. Her office door opened, and her father stepped just inside. "Victoria, could you come into my office, please?" "Is 10 minutes okay? I have a couple of important phone calls to make." "Please, Victoria, this won't wait." Victoria followed him through his office door and straight to the desk, where she took a seat in the chair directly in front. Her father pushed a stack of papers across the desk. Last-minute information for the conference, she thought. Picking them up, she gave him her attention as he spoke. "Victoria, what you're about to read will change many things, but never the fact that I love you very much. You are the most precious thing in my life. I would forfeit everything I've acquired to see you happy and to know you're protected and cared for." Jacob's voice faltered and then leveled. "Please read the document." Her stomach rolled, as when the building's elevator lurched to a halt, giving her a queasy knot in her throat. The strangeness of her father's words made taking her eyes off him difficult. There was regret written on his face, accompanied by the concrete resolve she was accustomed to. Her foreboding premonition returned with a vengeance. It took all her strength not to turn and scan the room behind her. Silently, he nodded toward the papers in her hand. Forcing her eyes downward, she attempted to make the printed material come into focus. Her trembling hand was not making the task easier. Laying the document in her lap, she began to read. The large lettering at the top was shocking, and the last words she'd expected to see. She held a marriage license. Sweet relief gushed through her. Finally, an explanation that made sense. His anxiety and strange behavior late was caused by the fact he had married without her knowledge. While the news did come as a shock, she wasn't at all upset. He'd been alone for a long time. If this was what he wanted, she was happy for him. An unbearable weight of uncertainty lifted. She stood and laid the papers on his desk. "Congratulations, Father. I'm surprised but very happy for you. Who is the woman? Do I know her?" Her father's horrified expression did not at all fit the occasion. Victoria, you misunderstood. Read the entire document." With those words, he nudged the papers back toward her. Confused, she scanned the document again. At last, the mystery problem revealed itself. This was a marriage certificate, all right, just not a normal one. Now she was thoroughly perplexed. What was he doing? Why was he marrying someone by proxy? She continued to read. Not believing her eyes, she pulled the document closer. The wording didn't change on closer inspection. In front of her, in bold, clear print, was her name. Her name presented a problem, but the name joined to hers was even more so. Be this known, Victoria Chantal Ballard and Prince Alif Benjamin Rashid Devar consent to become husband and wife. Victoria locked her eyes on the purple flush streaking up her father's face. She recognized the stubborn tightening of his jaw, and her mind thrashed about, looking for clarification to this bizarre situation. The papers slid from her hand and scattered about her feet. In an explosive move, she leaned across her father's desk. What is this? How did this happen? With hindsight, she knew exactly when her father had rushed her into signing those pages. He rose from his chair and skirted the edge of the desk. Approaching her, he slipped his hand under her right elbow. She jerked away from his touch and stepped back. Victoria, please, sit down, and I'll explain everything. Sit down? Sit down? You want me to sit down? You tricked me into signing those papers. Why? Never mind. Whatever you have done, you can undo. I will never, ever allow this to stand. Her mind unspooled, twisted and jammed in disbelief, like her favorite Celine Dion tape, ruined that very morning by the cannibalistic tape deck in her car. She'd struggled to free the tape from the diabolical piece of technology and had ended up with useless bits and pieces. She shook with denial. Victoria, please listen. Listen? You listen, Father. You've gone too far. I do not have a clue why you would manipulate my life in this insane way. However, if I, and I do mean if, I wanted to get married, Mr. Devar would be my last choice on this planet for a husband. He's an arrogant fool, and you are his equal. Enough, a voice commanded from behind her. Startled, Victoria spun in his direction. The frenzied turn caused her knee to collide with the chair, and a piercing pain shot up her leg. She wanted to curse the chair, her father, and most especially the hateful man bearing down on her. She would, too, just as soon as she could remember some 4-letter words and get her tongue moving. His long legs ate up the distance between them, and the intimidating force of his anger slammed into her. In another moment, he was so close she could see nothing but him. She edged backward, horrified, to find her father's desk blocking her retreat. Rashid's stance was aggressive, pure, dominant, male, as he stood a mere 6 inches in front of her. You have said more than enough. You will give your father an apology. Rashid, Jacob interceded. She is overcome. Perhaps we can give her a few minutes to compose herself. Victoria shrank from Rashid as he leaned toward her. Narrow, obsidian eyes demanded her attention. He did not blink. He did not give her 1 inch of space as he answered her father's appeal. Mr. Ballard, please do not interfere. Your daughter is now my wife. As such, I will determine her needs. And at present, her need is to stop this childish behavior and apologize as I have asked. It is a reasonable request. I'm sure Victoria regrets her disrespect. Victoria fought to keep the spasms in her stomach from becoming something much worse. If not for the loss of dignity, she would take immeasurable delight in vomiting all over the despicable tyrant. She wanted to scream at the maniac looming over her, but her lips were not cooperating, so she let her eyes do her talking. Rashid pressed his body closer and grasped the edge of the desk on each side of her hips. His nearness forced her to bend backward at an awkward angle. She knew she couldn't support this difficult position for long. Nevertheless, she would put a permanent kink in her back before she would lower her accusing eyes. His jaw hardened like a brick. I am waiting, Victoria. Sparkling jewels of light exploded in her head. Her eyes tingled and watered. The heat from his body penetrated her silk blouse, pressing, pushing, touching her. Her peripheral sight started to fade. At the center of what was left of her vision were hard lips demanding her compliance. A disjointed thought flashed through her mind. What would soften this man's mouth? She wanted to linger on the concept, but as her vision lessened, her small channel of light grew dimmer. She squeezed her eyes shut, then reopened them. The light flickered, trying in vain to stave off the conquering darkness. Losing the battle, it began to retreat. Wanting to stay within the safety of the light, Victoria followed it into oblivion. Rashid watched the light dim in Victoria's eyes. He wrapped his arm under her back before she could topple on the desk. Putting his other arm under her knees, he easily swung her up into his arms. He walked back to the alcove and placed her on the couch he and Khalifar had just vacated. He rubbed his fingers across hers to remove the chill from her skin. The fragility of her pale, translucent complexion lashed his conscience. When had he become such a man? To render a woman unconscious because of infernal temper was inexcusable. Never had a woman so easily aroused his emotions. Certainly none had ever tested his strength or authority, thinking she were equal to him. Is she all right? Jacob glared at his new son-in-law. If she has been harmed, I will never forgive myself or you. Rashid marshaled his tattered control. Enough damage had been done. He certainly did not want to add to Jacob's distress. Calm yourself, Jacob. Victoria's merely fainted. She will come around soon. She has suffered no lasting harm. You were too hard on her. She isn't like the women you're accustomed to. You cannot just order her around and expect her to comply. Rashid let go of his wife's hand and turned to face her father. Nor am I the caliber of man to whom she is accustomed. You trusted me with the care of your daughter. Do you not think you should have some faith in your decision? Victoria will never be happy until she accepts her position. To show weakness now would lock us in a battle for the rest of our lives. I will start this marriage the way it will be lived. But after the divorce, Victoria will no longer be subject to your ways. Why make this harder than necessary now? There will be no divorce. What? What do you mean? You said yourself Victoria could not properly fill the role of your wife. What are you doing? Rashid had not intended to discuss this aspect of his decision with Jacob until later, or perhaps not at all. Time would have eliminated the need. Now circumstances dictated otherwise. You think you know me well, Jacob, and in some degree you do. I will honor our agreement. Your daughter's safety is secured. No one will threaten her in any way. As your friend, you can depend on my word. As a man, your knowledge of me is not as thorough as you may have believed. I do not make frivolous commitments, nor do I utter vows I do not intend to honor. I accepted your daughter as my wife under your own law. She will remain such under mine. Why hold on to a woman you don't want? Jacob raised his hands in disbelief. Because I can. And as to wanting her, Rashid narrowed his eyes. This you failed to question. I could have secured your daughter's safety in many ways, none of which required me to marry a woman I did not desire. Make no mistake. What I want, I acquire, and what I acquire, I keep. Victoria moaned in resistance to the reality dissolving her calm sanctuary. Her eyelashes fluttered and then opened. She looked straight into Rashid's square-jawed expression as he pressed a glass of water to her lips. Before either of them could anticipate a response, she pushed the glass away from her mouth, splashing the contents over both of them. The cold wetness dispersed the foggy residue clouding her mind and rid her of Rashid's unwanted attention. He jerked to his feet and dispensed with a half-full glass of water. She took advantage of the space and scooted off the divan, waving off the helping hand he offered. She stalked back to her father's desk and leaned on its solid support. She inhaled deeply, hoping for a flash of mental brilliance which would give her the strength and advantage to regain control of this situation. She exhaled slowly, using the time to better gauge her adversaries and their motivations. Let me make sure I fully understand this mess. Glaring at her father, she said, "You deceived me into signing proxy documents for a marriage to Mr. Devar." "Yes," said Jacob. "If you will give me a moment, I can explain why I deemed this necessary. Prince Devar of Halaman." Victoria cut off her father's explanation. Seething at this new development, she scoffed. "No less than a prince? Well, father, you really have outdone yourself." Whatever this foreigner's motives, it was obvious he was nothing but an Arab dictator who thought he could subjugate her because she was a mere woman. He was wrong. The sooner she made that clear, the better. And you, Prince Devar, why would you agree to this outrageous arrangement? Are you an impoverished prince in need of money, perhaps? If so, what is your price? If you can be bought once, I'm sure you can be bought twice. She hurled the insults and reveled in the sparks flying from his hateful eyes. Her bravado was short-lived as he threw his head back and locked his fingers into fists. She also knew by the narrowing of his glare when he decided how to deal with her. He eliminated the space between them and coiled one arm around her waist. Breaching her space, he bent to whisper in her ear, his hot breath scorching her neck. Do you ever think before you speak? He drew her body more tightly against his. I would advise you to start now. Repelled, she jerked upward and pushed against him with all her strength. The savage did not budge. Failing in her effort, she could not help sagging a little against his arm. He released her and moved an inch away, allowing her room to stand. There is still the matter of an apology. Please do as I requested before you exhaust all my patience. He was insane. Looking at her father, she knew better than to expect any help from his quarter. She could tell by the warning look he gave Rashid that he wasn't too pleased with him, but he wasn't interfering on her behalf either. She could thwart their plans, but not under these conditions. If she learned nothing else about Rashid on their short acquaintance, she knew better than to underestimate his pig-headed resolve. Better to concede a small skirmish and concentrate on winning the war. She straightened her clothes, taking her time and drawing out the simple task. She may have to concede, but she could make his small victory exact an exasperating cost. She was sure waiting for a woman's compliance would be a pricey experience for him. For the first time since meeting this man, an inkling of success glimmered on the horizon. There was more than one way to yield to a dictator's commands. Victoria addressed her father. Let's see, what was my transgression now? Oh, yes, my silly exception to this criminal act. Simply unforgivable of me to object so strongly to your underhanded, despicable, and deceitful manipulation of my life. Rashid cleared his throat. She heard the warning, then dismissed it. And of course, I forgive you on the basis of your mental incapacity, which is proved by you choosing a tyrant as an accomplice. Turning to Rashid, she asked, does that satisfy? He stared at her in silence, incredulous shock written on his face. His victory was short-lived as a diabolical smirk tilted the corner of his mouth, a portent of things to come. For the moment, your apology will suffice. There will be sufficient time later for you to improve your contrition skills. Victoria heard the cough coming from behind Rashid. For the first time, she noticed the man who, by his similar looks and bearing, must have accompanied Rashid. Whoever he was, she didn't like his amused expression. Finding another outlet for her boiling rage, she turned on the stranger. And what do you find so entertaining? I suppose you're some lowly servant to this despot? Pity you. Rashid cut in before she could really get going. You would do well to curb your tongue, Victoria, before another apology is called for. Turning his back to her, he addressed her father. We will be leaving now, Jacob. Victoria will call to advise you of her safe arrival in a Holloman. Have no fear for your daughter's safety. I protect what is mine. Why, wait a minute. What departure? Bid your father goodbye, Victoria. We are leaving. Victoria whirled and gawked at Rashid. What are you talking about? I cannot leave. I won't. Rashid shifted his weight to one leg and crossed his arms over his chest. A dangerous tension crackled around him, contradicting his outward calm. Carrying a woman where she does not wish to walk is a small task for a man. Considering his veiled ultimatum ignited Victoria's creative thinking. Well, I need to return to my office to get my purse. His frown indicated a forthcoming rejection. Surely I will need my personal items and identification if I am to travel. Rashid took his time pondering her reasoning and then silently nodded his consent. As she headed for her office, the lowly servant opened the door for her. She could swear there was a look of respect in his eyes, but the lingering smile on his lips ruined the effect. Victoria wasn't sure what he found to smile about, and she wasn't interested in finding out. Her first thought was to get to Jessica. Jessica could devise a plan for anything. Entering her office, she picked up the packages containing her costume and headed for her private exit. The hair on the back of her arm stiffened as she envisioned Rashid's anger at finding her gone. She was not her father's daughter for nothing. She possessed a formidable will of her own, and she knew how to implement a plan. This was New York, not some obscure Middle Eastern dictatorship. If he pushed her any further, she would have him arrested for stalking. Rashid was satisfied. Victoria's capitulation was a good thing. Now they could make progress. He could soften his manner and exert more patience. She embodied a warrior's fearlessness, but she would need to learn to temper her boldness against his superior strength and will. No doubt she better understood this now. Smiling, he resolved to show her the utmost courtesy and charm when she returned. My lord, Khalifar whispered at Rashid's side. Perhaps the princess needs assistance. Rashid was slow to gather his thoughts back to the present. Why would Victoria need assistance? Her office was only a small distance across the reception area. 20 minutes have passed, my lord. Perhaps there is a problem, said Khalifar. Where was his wife? Spinning toward the door, Rashid exited Jacob's office and crossed the reception area. His temper flashed to boiling. Surely she would not dare to disobey him. Khalifar quickened his stride to keep up. Jacob followed. Rashid yanked open the heavy door to Victoria's office. The spacious room held an array of crafted mahogany furnishings, impressive artwork, and a spectacular view of the New York skyline, but not his wife. Another door to the right of Victoria's desk stood open, giving him an unrestricted view of a small hallway and elevator. Courtesy? Charm? The words exploded in his head. He would strangle her when he found her. She had made him the fool she labeled him earlier, and he seethed with the humiliation. This woman thought she could challenge him and win. She would soon know better. Victoria's right foot tapped in double time as descending floor numbers lit up on the panel over the elevator door. She could hear her heartbeat pounding in her ears and beads of perspiration dampening her skin. All she needed was a few minutes' head start to get to the underground garage in the company limousine. No, she couldn't use the limo. The driver would be the first person her father would question. The snail-like elevator jerked to a stop. She did not breathe. She froze as the doors retracted. No one stood in her way. Resisting the urge to run, she crossed the garage at a brisk walk and headed for the street entrance. A taxi stood at the curb, unloading passengers. As soon as they cleared the way, Victoria tossed her packages into the rear seat and slid in beside them. She was giddy with relief when the driver pulled into the main flow of traffic. Freedom. A surge of sweet revenge filled her with euphoria. Just imagining the hole in Rashid's inflated ego when he found her gone was worth the risk. He would probably turn his anger toward her father. Good. Her father deserved any consequences he received. What misguided reasoning could have possibly induced him to act this irresponsibly? No one arranged his grown daughter's marriage to a stranger, especially a foreign devil. What was he thinking? Was the company in trouble? Did he need money? Questions jumped at her one after the other. Too many questions and not one answer. This can't be happening. The sound of her own voice startled her. Are you okay, lady? The driver asked. Yes, I'm fine. I just need to get where I'm going in a hurry. Victoria counted as she breathed in and out. She didn't need to hyperventilate now. Perhaps she was overreacting. Surely after a demonstration of her unwillingness, any civilized man would concede defeat and have the good sense to go home. On the other hand, good sense didn't seem to be one of Prince Devar's strongest qualities. The fact he was a prince added a deep layer of complexity to her questions. Did his superiority and conceit come from a position of power or from his culture? Either way, she didn't want to be on the receiving end of his immeasurable arrogance. Get a grip, Victoria. Once again, she drew the concerned look of the driver as she voiced her thoughts aloud. Taking out her cell phone, she punched in Jessica's number. Hello? Jessica, thank goodness you're home. Don't leave. I'll be there in another 10 minutes. I'm in a terrible crisis. You've got to help me. Victoria, where are you? What's the matter? Victoria caught the driver's scrutinizing look in the rearview mirror. Realizing she was divulging too much information in front of a stranger, she lowered her voice. I'll explain all when I get there. You've got to help me. Calm down. I'll be here. Surely things can't be as bad as you sound. Everything is awful. He's a nightmare. He? Who's he? I'm counting on you, Jessica. I'll be there soon. Bye. She slipped the phone back into her purse as the taxi stopped in front of an upscale apartment complex. After handing the driver a generous tip, she gathered her packages and vacated the vehicle. Before she could knock on Jessica's door, it swung open to reveal a shocking sight. Victoria's only hope stood in the opening, dressed in camouflage underwear with jumbo curlers in her hair and an oatmeal mask plastered on her face. Come in, come in. You're not being followed, are you? Jessica dragged Victoria into the hallway and then rechecked the outside perimeter. When she was certain no one lurked in the bushes, she secured the door, no simple task, with 6 security locks. Whirling on Victoria, she exploded. What in the world is happening? You scared me to death. You were in such a panic, I thought someone was trying to kill you or something. Victoria opened her mouth and nothing came out. She tried again. The best she could do was a pitiful squeak. An uncontrollable shaking started in her knees, moved up her body, and set her teeth to chattering. I've never seen you like this before. Now you really are scaring me. Come, sit down before you fall down. Jessica pushed Victoria toward a chair. Then I'll go get you something to drink. Victoria moved toward the chair Jessica offered, grateful to sink into its overstuffed cushions. Burrowing deep into their puffiness, she fought the overwhelming need to hide. How was she going to explain to Jessica the unexplainable? Especially since her thoughts were like Roman candles, rapid flashes of light and shape which streaked without short-lived brilliance across her mind and then disappeared. Here, drink this, said Jessica. It's just a little something to guarantee you supercharge your engines. Then maybe we can get to the bottom of this. Victoria clutched the glass. With her eyes fixed on Jessica, she took a large gulp and then another in quick succession. Heat. Scorching heat. A burning river of lava seared her throat and shot a pyroclastic plume straight up her nose. A spasm of painful coughs followed. Her eyes poured with water, and grabbing her throat, she glared at her executioner and tried to speak. What? Breathe shallow, Victoria. Jessica pounded her in the middle of the back. Heavens, don't you know you're supposed to sip brandy slowly? Are you trying to kill yourself? The wounded muscles in her throat unleashed their death grip, giving her air to fill her lungs and a voice. Me? You're the one who gave me the poison. How was I supposed to know the drink was lethal? Jessica sat perched on the arm of Victoria's chair. Her eyes shone with serious concern one moment and then closed as she burst into laughter. Victoria couldn't suppress the hilarity infecting her friend, so she joined her. When they had used up every last giggle, Jessica insisted upon hearing the details of Victoria's predicament. For the next 20 minutes, Victoria recounted the unbelievable turn of events in her life. The story should have taken only 10 minutes, but Jessica's interruptions were constant and vocal, her opinions short, explosive, and many. Unacceptable. Horrible. What a beast. They can't treat women this way. This is war. To have a freedom fighter on her side with such enthusiasm bolstered Victoria's confidence. As much as Jessica loved the adoration of the male species, she never considered herself any less than their equal, both mentally and physically. Surely, with her help, Victoria could get out of this mess with the least amount of embarrassment. The third thing we'll do... Wait, Jessica. Third, what are you talking about? She must have retreated completely into her own thoughts. Obviously, she was missing Jessica's strategy. I'm sorry. I must still be a little buzzed with the brandy. I think I missed the first two parts. Pay attention, Victoria. How am I going to get you out of this mess if you don't listen to me? The intrigue of battle darkened Jessica's frothy green eyes. Victoria could almost read the words retribution and reckoning in their depths. Straightening in her chair, she gave her commanding general her full attention. After all, this was the only army she had. Jessica laid out her combat strategy in logistical detail. Your desert rat prince won't do anything at a public gathering. He wouldn't want anyone to know he couldn't keep track of his property now, would he? Therefore, you must be at the ball tonight. We'll sneak you out prior to the presentations. No one will be expecting you to leave before the award presentations, so we'll have an element of surprise. I'll book a hotel for a few days until we can get some legal muscle on your side. We'll keep you very public or very lost. They may show up here at any time, so we had better move out. Gathering costume gear and all the girl-related accessories was daunting. Since she had no other clothes with her, a quick detour to a clothing boutique was a necessary side trip. They managed to finish everything in a little over an hour, giving them plenty of time to locate a hotel. Jessica lapsed to an unusual silence as she drove, no doubt refining her strategy. Victoria hoped her friend was right about Rashid. Perhaps his dignity would keep him from following her to the ball and causing a public embarrassment to himself. not to mention her. Surely he knew how ludicrous he'd look chasing down an errant bride in this modern time and place. But she had no way of judging what his parameters of behavior were. Wasn't one supposed to know their enemy? Whatever force moved this man didn't exist in her realm of experience. When they finally pulled into the hotel of Jessica's choice, Victoria was exhausted. She needed a nap and a shower, preferably in that order. As the attendants unloaded their meager luggage, she followed Jessica to the front desk. How could she do otherwise? Jessica had latched onto her arm with a death grip. "Let me do the talking," whispered Jessica. "Do what you can to look invisible. We don't need anyone recognizing you." "Let go of my arm. You're cutting off the circulation. Besides, I'm not the one making a spectacle of myself. People are already staring at us funny." To Jessica's credit, she composed herself in less than 3 seconds, and in another 5 minutes had secured a room under the name of Joan Troy and Helen Ark. When they finally settled in their room, Jessica decided to swim a few laps in the hotel's indoor pool. Victoria took the opportunity to check on the children. She dug her cell out of her purse and dialed Applewood. The night nanny in charge told her Breeze and Emily were at movie night. She didn't want to drag them away from one of their favorite treats, so she asked if she could talk to Tally and Aaron. To her dismay, Aaron was in the infirmary for the evening because he had a low-grade fever. Finally, Tally's bubbly little voice brightened her evening. "Hi, Toria. I got ice cream." "Oh, sounds yummy. What flavor?" "Strawberry." "Aaron got vanilla, but he didn't eat it. His throat hurts. Nurse Judy said he caught a cold. I don't know how he did that, 'cause he never catches the ball I throw for him. I'm sure he will get better very soon, and you can play ball with him some more. When I hang up the phone, I'm going to tell him some stories." "What kind of stories are you going to tell him?" "About bugs and snakes and dragons." "He'll love your stories. I have to go now, Tally. I'm sending lots of hugs and kisses. You give them to everybody, okay? I love you." "Okay, Toria, love you too. Bye." She put the phone up, kicked off her shoes, slipped out of her skirt, and loosened the top few buttons of her blouse. Pulling back the satin coverlet, she slipped under its cool softness and settled her head on the down-filled pillow. Well, we've covered some ground, haven't we? Things are still boiling in this pot. What do you think about the situation? What do you think is coming next? How would you have handled Rashid at that point? Or your father, for that matter? Victoria is quite a woman. And I hope I am infusing some humor into this story also for you. Because as serious as it is, life sometimes can really throw us curveballs. And it's not so much the situation as how we handle it that defines us as people. So until next episode, please stay romanticized. Bye-bye.